2026 has to be one of the most interesting years for K-pop. Lots of disappointments from groups I expected everything from, but also some genuinely surprising favorites I didn't see coming at all. After doing these videos for a couple years now, I've seen a lot, and this year might have the most controversial placements I've ever made.
No.
We have almost 70 releases to cover, which I think is the most that I've ever done in a single video. Let's get started. One of the first albums that I'd like to talk about is I.V's Revive Plus. One of the earlier releases this year, and I think it's fair to say that the clear highlights here are both Bang Bang and Black Hole. Some people might even praise their solo work, with Gall's Oddball being the one that I see everybody talking about the most. I don't know what you guys see in it, but it just didn't click for me, and not just hers, but all of the solo songs on here from top to bottom. Now, I'm not saying that they were garbage, trust me, I've seen worse, but I wouldn't really say it's some of their best either. The B-sides were better, like Fireworks and especially Stuck in Your Head, which was actually one of my favorite songs of the year so far. But yeah, this album as a whole, it was pretty decent, but just didn't totally blow me away. Let's put this in the solid tier. Misumo's Play was such a massive release. With 12 songs to choose from, there's plenty of options, but more doesn't always mean better. When this first came out, I didn't find myself listening to it that much, as I didn't really find it all too interesting to begin with. The only songs that I really liked were Deep Eden, Confetti, and some of their solo work. Also, I don't know why they decided to include Identity, Do Not Touch, and Message on here, as those are all past songs. I guess that's their way of trying to revive them, but regardless, I'm not a huge fan of old songs on new releases. In terms of replay value, I wasn't really too impressed. Now, it's not flat out bad, but it's definitely my least favorite release from them so far, which is a tough pill for me to swallow, as I am a huge fan of Misumo, but I can't see this being any higher than the OK tier. Lisa's Goals was a World Cup collaborative song, and there was so much potential, but I really feel like Lisa dropped the ball here. No, no pun intended. I think she started out kind of decent, but that momentum was short-lived, and her choice of words were kind of basic in my opinion, and of the three, her execution was my least favorite. It really hurts saying that, as she was my first bias when I got into K-pop, but man, it could have been so much better. And that's a statement that I've been saying about her since last year. So Lisa has honestly just been kind of disappointing me lately, and I don't know how I feel about that. I'll tell you how I feel about this song though, and it's not good. This goes in the bad tier. Yena has honestly been one of my favorite soloists for a while now, and even though last year I wasn't super impressed by her work, I think Love Catcher was a great way to revive my faith in her. Catch Catch in particular really brought me back to her Nemu Nemu days, where it has that rich J-pop kind of style, and I was really happy for her as she was trending so hard with this song. I think this song deserves to be in contention for Song of the Year. There are 5 songs to choose from here, and I think all of them were well made. Spring Fever and April's Cat would be my favorites if I had to pick. For sure, this goes up in the great tier. Easily one of the releases that I looked forward to the most this year was Blackpink's Deadline. I even pre-ordered the physical album, which is rare for me to do, with the only other one being Jennie's Ruby. Anyway, where do I even begin? Being that this is their 10th anniversary, I was really expecting something on the level of like Twice's This Is 4, or Enemy, or even their 10th album. And what did we get? 5 songs. 4 if we're being honest, since Jump was a past single. But let me tell you man, if this is really how they commemorate their 10th anniversary, especially as someone who has them as their ults, then I just might have to replace them with some other group, because right now, it just really feels like they don't give a shit. And it's getting harder and harder for me to defend them. And I get it, everyone has different expectations, but how often do we get to see groups celebrate a decade in the industry and not lose a single member? And look, I got to experience Twice in person last year, and I walked out there stunned. And seeing them ramp up their activities to go pretty much all out for their fans really showcased their appreciation to once. And I kind of want a piece of that, but from Blackpink. Granted, we still have half a year to go through, so hopefully they surprise us, but if I'm being honest, I wouldn't hold my breath. Even with the Deadline tour last year, it just feels like we're still stuck in the Born Pink era. But as for these songs, the only one that I truly enjoyed was Go. Everything else was kind of forgettable, if I'm being honest. Me and I was pretty decent, but I wasn't crazy about it. So I'm dropping this all the way down in the okay tier. And the only reason why it's not in the bad tier is because Go is like one of my favorite songs of the year. But really, it deserves a spot in the bad tier. ITZY's motto has been getting a lot of praise lately, and I've seen comments of people saying that they're saving K-pop and all. I personally liked the solo songs on here more than I did the title track. Now, I will say this, they have been improving a lot lately in terms of their quality of work, and for sure this is part of that, but I don't think it was as impressive to me as Collector or even Tunnel Vision. I'll place this in the great tier though. Whole Different Animal really blew the socks off my feet, and I love seeing aespa take on the more aggressive approach and even sprinkle in a more darker theme, and it just felt so familiar to Armageddon, which is my favorite ever from them back in 2024, and this has been one of my favorite songs from them in a little while, especially compared to last year. This easily gets a spot up in the perfect tier. I've been having a lot of mixed feelings about Baby Monster lately. As for Sugar Honey Iced Tea, the song itself was pretty cool, but I'm personally not a fan of the choice of the title. Like, it's a cute way to say shit, and I don't know, it just looks weird to me. It still made a good summer song though, but I don't think I would call it their best work. It also feels like they're moving a bit too quick with their releases, as I'm still trying to process Choom and barely got the chance to appreciate We Go Up. So hopefully this doesn't affect their quality of work being rushed in the near future. But this lands in the solid tier for me. NMIX has worked with Pablo Vittar before, and it feels like they've built this relationship together, as Tick Tick is their second single. And it took me a couple tries to really get into the song. Like, it was decent, but personally, I'd take Mesh over this any day. I think they were too dependent on the chorus, and I can't lie, I got tired of it pretty quick. But still, I think it was pretty good for an NMIX song, so I'll put this in the solid tier. Kiss of Life are one of those groups that it's hard to say that they've ever had any misses. I mean, Lucky was probably the closest, but Who Is She? I think that point still stands, at least for me. Not a lot of options here, of course, as it is a single. The B-side was fine, but the title track kicked so much ass. Not their best work, but easily a highlight of the year. Let's put this in the solid tier. Since Mantra, it really feels like Jennie has ruled the K-pop world with an iron fist. Every single release since then has gone viral, with Dracula. Even though it's not her original work, it's a remix feature of a song by Tame Impala last year, but with her on it, it just sounds so much better. What I really appreciate about Jennie is that she's expanding her artistry with so many big names. Think of The Weeknd, Doechii, Kali Uchis, and Childish Gambino, and my personal favorite, Dua Lipa. I feel like she's really striving to become such an icon, even outside of K-pop, and I can't wait to see who she collabs with next. This deserves a spot up in the perfect tier. Last year, I feel like aespa was infamous for having songs that had so much potential but would fall slightly short, the biggest example being Dirty Work, and this year, I think it's Attitude. I like the song for the most part, but when the beat drops or whatever, it just sounds really goofy. I don't know what it is with aespa coming out with songs once in a while that start out banging, but all the suspense is killed off by some weird ass choice of instrumentals, and they gotta stop doing that. It's low key pissing me off. This gets dropped down to the okay tier, could have been up in the great tier if it was a bit more polished. IVE's Bang Bang was a fantastic way to kick off the new year, and after having such a dominating run last year, I feel like they carried that momentum into 2026 with this single. Revive Plus obviously didn't meet that sort of standard for me, but if we want to talk about Bang Bang individually, it was so much better. But also not really on the level of some of their iconic songs from the past either. So I'll put that up in the great tier. Hearts to Hearts were my favorite rookies coming out of 2025, and it really feels like they were dropping so many bangers left and right. Rude was another one of those earlier releases this year, and I know it has received a ton of praise. And I would say it has even had its moments of going viral, but I personally wasn't the biggest fan of it. Now, I'm not saying it was bad at all, but it's just not my favorite release from them so far. Still, I'll put it up in the great tier. Baymon's Choom is another one of those releases that I looked forward to when entering the new year, and I was really hoping that it would top We Go Up, but unfortunately, I wasn't super impressed with it. I mean, the only songs that I really liked were the title track and Moon, but if I'm being honest here, I'm really starting to feel the fatigue of the YG formula. Like, Baemon clearly has more of a focus on the hip hop style, and there are so many opportunities in their music to dedicate that style or even lean more towards a rapping theme, kind of like what they did with Click Clack, at least for the most part. But I feel like they kind of ruin it by always transitioning these songs into a more of a pop kind of song, and to me, it just really kills the momentum. And in my opinion, it doesn't allow Baemon to showcase their true power. I'm not saying their music is bad at all, but it just feels like it could be so much better. I'll place this up in the solid tier. I'm not even going to embarrass myself by trying to pronounce I.Le's album, but I will say I've been really impressed with the great majority of their releases since their debut, and this album still holds up to that statement. Now, I don't think it's their very best. I'll still probably give that title to I Like You, and even though this was a smaller release, I still think that it has great replay value, and I totally loved the ballad Love Older You. It's Me is also one of my favorite songs of the year, so a lot of strong pieces in here, and I think they deserve more credit for their quality of work. This goes up in the great tier. You know, for a moment last year, I kind of had a feeling that I.O.I were losing their touch in terms of music quality, as I didn't really like anything from last year, except for one of their ballads from their Japanese release. But Mono showed me that they still got it in them. Easily one of my favorite songs of the year, and also one of my favorite songs from them from probably the past 2 to maybe 3 years. I also really appreciate the message behind this song, as it means a lot to me as a fan, but also it feels like they're the only ones out here speaking up on being yourself, so big ups to I.Dle. This definitely goes up in the perfect tier. Let's talk about another release from Hearts to Hearts, and that's Lemon Tang. Kind of similar to Rude, like it was really good, but it just didn't feel like their absolute best. However, I will say I do notice them slightly dipping their toes, more so within the hip hop space, with their songs having moments with those elements, and it would be interesting to see them fully dive into that one day, but we'll see. Regardless, I did enjoy the options on this album, and I liked it slightly more than Rude, so I'll put this up in the great tier as well. I don't know if it's just me, but I've noticed over the years that I've always comes out with singles that feel so under the radar. Fashion is one of those singles, and typically these are their hidden gems, but I can't say that about this song. To me, it came across as really generic, and comparing this to recent years, I would say it's one of their weakest songs in a while. Sorry, but I gotta put this down in the bad tier. NMIX has been one of the most impressive groups to me ever since I started this channel, and every year it feels like they come out with some of the best music out there. Look at their FE34 trilogy, Blue Valentine, and even High Horse. They have some serious momentum to become one of the best groups in terms of quality of work, and I feel like at this point they've really set the standard among themselves, and I started having higher expectations every year. With Heavy Serenade, I think it was really impressive from top to bottom, with Different Girl and maybe even Crescendo being some of the hard carries on this album. The rest of the songs were also fine, but it didn't feel like their usual work from past releases. That being said, I think Heavy Serenade is one of my least favorite releases from them in the past maybe 3 years. But even so, I think it's still more impressive than a lot of other releases on here. So for that, I will place this up in the great tier. You know, with my last video, I kind of had issues with posting it on time because there was just way too many new releases coming out, which naturally caused delays for me. But obviously, I need to draw the line somewhere, and that was with IZNA's Set the Tempo. Kind of wish I didn't do that, because this may be one of my favorite releases from them, probably since their debut album, and to me it really reminded me of I.O.I's album with that nostalgic kind of vibe, and it felt like a breath of fresh air when comparing it to a lot of other releases which felt very similar in style. This easily earns a spot up in the perfect tier. So Irene is my Red Velvet bias, and the reason why I chose her was because of her solo album Like a Flower, which came out 2 years ago. I really love her taste in music, and I felt like it really aligned with my style. With this album, though, even though it was a big release, I really struggled to find many songs that caught my interest like her first album did. Not to say that nothing did at all. I really enjoyed Black Halo, Spit It Out, and MTV. It's still better than a lot of stuff on here, but even so, I wasn't totally blown away. Let's just place this up in the solid tier. Triple S is a group that I've always viewed as the hidden gem of the fifth generation. By that I mean they have such a large catalog of music with so many well polished songs to choose from Assemble 24 and 25 to Inner Dance. With Love and Pop, I've been noticing a lot of people really loving it. I've even seen some comments of fans calling it their best work, but I just don't see it. I've played through the entire album several times and nothing really clicked for me. Like, maybe it's just my personal taste, but this easily has been one of my least favorite releases from them since I discovered them. Probably not as boring as Password, but for sure down that path. Sorry, but this is going down in the OK tier. Apart from Hearts to Hearts, Kiki has also been one of my favorite rookies coming out of last year, and so far I've been really impressed with their selection of music. This year with the Lulu pack, I think that point still stands. 404 New Era has to be their best work by far in my opinion, but also I feel like the B-sides were full of hidden gems. Now, even though I loved this release, I can't put it on the same level as some of those pieces up there, so I'll have to keep this down in the great tier. I feel like this year we've been seeing a lot more collabs than ever before, and one of those is between aespa and Anderson .Paak for their song Keychain. I think this was a really strong song and for sure one of those under the radar type of singles, especially for aespa. I don't see anybody talking about this song and I think it should have been promoted better. Definitely one of my favorite songs from them this year, and it was so good that it goes up in the perfect tier. I-dle has been dabbling a bit more into that J-pop sort of style lately with their music, and very similar to Keychain, Bubby got like little to no promotion at all, and nobody's really talking about it, but in this instance, I don't think it was even close to being that good. Now, it wasn't flat out garbage, but it just came across as really boring, and I might even call this their weakest song since their debut. Honestly, I want to put this down in the bad tier, but I think it's slightly better than those that are in that tier, so I'll keep it in the OK tier. Easily the biggest collab, not just this year, but in recent years, is I.Dle's LE SSERAFIM's and Cat's Eye's Iconic by Mistake. I feel like this song was their way to take a swing at all of their haters, as it really had a diss track kind of style, and I loved every bit of it. Not just that though, but this is the type of work I want to see more of in the industry, and hopefully it inspires other groups to do the same. It's not even a debate, bro. This is going up in the perfect tier. Very similar to Attitude and Bubby, another song that has basically been kept in the shadows is I.Dle's Hide and Seek, and also probably one of the most non-I.Dle type of songs that I've ever heard from them. I feel like it had some potential, but the execution to me felt really generic and honestly forgettable. No offense to I.Dle, it felt very similar to their quality of work from last year, which I wasn't a huge fan of. Comparing this to something like Mono, it's a night and day difference, so I'll drop this down in the OK tier. I've said this many times before, but I think since last year, there's been a ton of solo debuts, and this year, Yuna's is easily my favorite. Ice Cream was phenomenal, and she really blew me away with the release from top to bottom. Like, yeah, it was a small EP, but like always, I prefer quality over quantity, and after hearing her solo work, I think she has the potential to be a strong soloist. Not on the level of someone like Jennie or Rose, of course, but I would say maybe someone like Yeji, Irene, or even Somi. This for damn sure gets a spot up in the perfect tier. Let's talk about another collab, and that's Jihyo and Genevieve with their song Heavenly. I think Jihyo truly has the capability to be a giant soloist if she focused on it for a year or two. Now, I know this was a feature, but Jihyo did really well on this song, and it's one of my favorite songs of the summer. And it was so good that I would love to see them work together again someday. I'll put this up in the great tier. Kep1er has been one of those groups that I've been trying to get into a few years now, but it never really clicked for me. Last year, I was actually really impressed with their Bubblegum release, but I think this year, with Crack Code, it easily tops that. This was a hard-hitting EP full of bangers, and I think it deserves more attention. And it also feels like Kepler are trying to evolve as a group and head into a different direction, which is refreshing, and I admire them for that. So hopefully it works out for them down the road. This goes up in the great tier. Another group that I've had a hard time liking for a few years is Billy. This year, however, they came out swinging with, I think, one of the biggest albums on this entire list with a generous 12 songs. They've also included remixes, and I typically don't like these, but I think the ones on here were great. So there's plenty of options to choose from, and very similar to Kepler, it looks like Billy took a similar path by kind of pushing a more hard-hitting style, which is a new look compared to what I remembered from them a while back. Would I say I'm a fan? Not yet, but this album has piqued my interest, and I'll keep them in the back of my mind moving forward. For now, I'll place this in the great tier. One of the groups that I was recommended a lot this year was I.O.I, and so I decided to give them a chance by checking out As If, as it was my introduction to them, and I gotta say, they really strike me as one of those groups that make some top shelf quality music. So think of Racine and Triple S, and now I.O.I. With 5 songs on here, I think there was some great variety depending on what mood you're in, and I found myself returning to this EP quite a few times already. Easily one of the biggest surprises to me this year, so I'll put them up in the great tier. Speaking of groups of high quality, Racine's Pinball was a great way to kick off the new year, and it's also another one of those songs that I feel like have gone unnoticed by the industry, but the quality was fantastic, and I think it deserves infinitely more attention. This for sure goes up in the perfect tier. If we want to keep talking about underrated groups, 50/50 has to be one of those that have caught my eye since last year, as they also have some great music. And if you guys know me, you would know how much I love ballads. And I think this one was incredible. The song has more of a Western vibe, which is different, and I think their vocal work was awesome. I'll toss this up in the perfect tier. I.O.I's Lucid Dream has to be one of their most underrated singles in recent years. Not their best work, of course, but at this point it feels like a lot of their singles have been hit or miss, and to me this was definitely a hit. With the exclusion of Fashion, of course, we can leave that one out. Besides that, I'll put this up in the great tier. Runaway is another single by Racine, and I think it was pretty decent, but if I'm being honest, it just might be one of my least favorites from them, which is tough for me to say because they've had nothing but great stuff since their debut, but even still, I think it's miles ahead of anything in the lower tiers. I'll keep this in the solid tier. Young Posse has been one of those groups that have really had me in a chokehold since their album Cold, which was from last year, and since then I've been a huge fan of their work, and with Visa, I think they kicked so much ass. When it comes to rapping, I think they're one of the most impressive coming out of the 5th generation, at least on the level as a group. Individually, it's obvious who really owns that element, but anyway, even though there are only 2 songs here, I think it really complements both that explosive and calm atmosphere, and I think this is even one of the releases that I've listened to the most this year. Now, is it their best work? Really hard for me to say, but I think it's definitely one of my favorites from them so far. Without a question, this goes up in the perfect tier. 50/50 Starstruck has to be one of my favorite songs from their catalog, and I'm really impressed with how flexible they can be with pretty much making music of all sorts of styles. Again, another one of those songs that I think deserves more attention. I'll put this up in the great tier. Here we go again, Lisa with another collab, and guys, I really want to say this. Ever since Alter Ego, my expectations for Lisa's music have not been met. If we go back in time, her song Money really made me a fan of her, and initially when I got into K-pop, she was my first bias, but lately, man, she just hasn't really been impressing me a lot with her music. I don't know if she's just not putting in the effort in terms of her artistry, but a lot of these songs just come across as really underwhelming, and it's really a tough pill to swallow, but I don't see this anywhere above the OK tier. Like, it was just slightly better than Gold's, but I really hope she improves in the future. And I know she has the raw potential to be just as big as Jennie and Rosé, maybe even bigger if she locked in for a year or so, but as of right now, I'm just not impressed. Another release by 50/50, and again, they've been consistently impressing me a lot since last year with their quality of work, and it really seems like a group to look out for in the future. This album to me packed a serious punch, and it has strong replay value. Definitely some of my favorite work from them as well. Let's put it up in the perfect tier. VVS has been one of those groups that have really filled in that gap for me that Bad Villain lacked, as that was a group that I believed had so much potential a couple years back, but I haven't really seen anything from them for a while now. And to be honest, I don't even know what the future projection of VVS looks like because of recent events, and it really seems like a lot of these rap heavy groups within the fifth generation are like always at the bottom of the industry. But let's not lose track. I think VVS have been really impressive with their music since day one and have nothing but straight bangers. With Stay the Night, they really absorbed that Miami atmosphere, which felt very familiar to me as it is my hometown, and just seeing a K-pop group take on that theme is so awesome since we almost never get any attention from K-pop in general. But as for their music, I think it was very generous in terms of options to choose from. Granted, it's not as massive as Billy's album, but I find myself returning to this album a lot, and it just might be my favorite release from them as well. The song Bottles in particular was really awesome, and it just really sucks that I.I.L.E has left, because I think this was her best song so far, and it really just feels like she went out with a bang. I'll put this deep in the perfect tier. LE SSERAFIM are one of those rare groups that it's really hard to look through their discography and find any misses. For me, Spaghetti may have been the closest one in recent years, just for its goofy approach, but even then I wouldn't say that song was bad.
Not bad, not bad.
But their albums always have a ton to offer, and I really look out for their ballads. So for Pure Flow, that would be Need Your Company, which I think should have been longer. It's barely even 2 minutes. Like, why the fuck do short songs even exist?
My disappointment is immeasurable, and my day is ruined.
Like, for intros, I can understand, but for ballads, dude, oh my god. I feel some type of way. Besides that, I love this album from top to bottom. I know when it first came out, they received mixed reactions from fans for both Boompala and Celebration, but I like those too. Now, those two are probably the weakest out of this album, as I feel like the B-sides were infinitely better. And low-key, I would say the same about a lot of their past releases. Their B-sides are always loaded with hidden gems, and sometimes it even feels like they're promoting all the wrong songs. But that's just my opinion. Either way, well done. This goes up in the perfect tier for sure. Baby Don't Cry were like one of those rookies from last year that I found to be the least interesting, more so for their music quality. It just really came across as low effort and generic, and I really want to give them a chance, but with this song, I think it was pretty decent so far. Their best work? Possibly, but even then, I'm still not totally blown away by Shapeshifter, but hopefully they surprise me in the future. So for now, I'll place this in the solid tier. Alright, now let's talk about one of my biggest pet peeves when it comes to K-pop, and that's whenever I check out a new album, I look at it, and at first glance, it looks like it's loaded with so many new songs, but come to find out, it's a bunch of old releases. And here, we have a total of 17 songs with only 2 new songs. 2! BB did the same shit with her album last year, and it was so frustrating, especially after waiting so long for another comeback. Can we please stop fucking doing this? What's the whole point of this anyway? To revive old songs? This deserves to be down in the bad tier. Now, if they really released Moi as a single, that would have been great, as I really enjoyed that song, but top to bottom, what the fuck, Stacy? Alright, so Everglow is one of those groups that I've had comments about for a while now, and the only song that I've ever listened to before was Dun Dun, which was awesome, but that was way back when I first got into K-pop, which was in 2023, and I was just listening to a bunch of random K-pop songs to find what I really liked, but today, with their most recent release, Code, I thought I'd give them another chance, and I gotta say, they really remind me of those early days of aespa, and that's that heavy electronic style. And with Code, it felt pretty nostalgic to me, as they kind of have that 2000s sort of vibe. And I gotta say, I loved it. Songs like Focus and Breakout were awesome. Definitely one of those releases that caught me by surprise. Now, I'm not a fan just yet, but I will say that I am interested in Everglow moving forward. Let's put this up in the great tier. Let's talk about Maiden, one of those super underrated groups coming out of the fifth generation, and I do remember really loving their music when they first debuted, and very similar to Stacy's album, a release full of stuff other than new music. At least in this case, it's just different versions of the song, which is whatever to me, but still, I think this should have just been a single, as there's just two new songs on here. But I will say, I think these songs are great, and Super Obvious came across to me as an opening to an anime or something. I don't know. Punk for me was the winner though. I love the chill vibes, and it just might be one of my favorite songs from them. I hope to see Maiden receive more attention one day, and similar to Racine, I think they have some of the most underrated music across the fifth generation. This goes in the solid tier. Let's talk about another release from Baby Don't Cry, and it's their first mini album, After Cry. This is what I want to see from them, and that's high quality music and great variety, and they definitely delivered that here. It's their best work by far, and it's not even close. This release covers a song for every mood, from hard hitting songs like Moves Like Ciara to the incredible ballad Tears on My Pillow, and I feel like if I caught this album earlier, I would have definitely marked this song as one of my favorite ballads of the year so far. I gotta say this, they have really impressed me with this album, and I look very much forward to their next comeback because this was amazing. I will put this up in the great tier. If you've seen my last video, you would know how much I've praised Meow with Bite Now. I mean, they typically don't release a ton of music, but that allows them to focus more on quality over quantity, and because of that, they consistently come out with banger after banger, with Diruri easily being the best of the best, no question about it. I also really love the ballad Revenge, and Hit 'Em honestly feels like a title track caliber song in my opinion. I feel like other groups should take notes and try slowing down some of their releases because in my opinion, there's nothing worse than a rushed release, and at times it's quite noticeable. Kinda obvious where I'm placing this, and that's at the very top of the tier list. I feel like ever since Jump, we've been seeing a lot of groups take a swing at similar styles. I've seen comments throughout the year of fans having mixed feelings about it, but I personally really liked it. Celebration was Le Seraphim's first single of the year, and I think it's kind of refreshing to see, at least compared to their original work. Now, I'm not saying I'm tired of their music, I'm a big fan, but I do like to see groups try something different every once in a while. It's nowhere near their best work, of course, but I think their standard when it comes to music is in the upper echelon of the industry. Celebration is a very upbeat song that's a lot of fun to listen to, and I listen to it every morning while driving to work to keep me awake. So I will place this up within the perfect tier. One of IZNA's first singles of the year was Love All, and I gotta be honest here, I think this is my least favorite IZNA song of all time. I know, kinda harsh for me to say right out the gate, but this song just felt super basic, and I know they're better than that. Really disappointing here. This goes down in the bad tier. Another group that was recommended to me a lot by the comments over the years is WJSN. I don't know how to pronounce that, or Cosmic Girls, I don't know. They came out with this single and it really screams that old school K-pop style, which is nice, and I really love the vocal work on here. Definitely a strong first impression for me, and I'd be interested in their future work. Their song Mirror really won me over, and it was so good that I'm going through their entire discography as we speak, so really good stuff. I'll put this up in the great tier. Now I know I kind of took a bit of a swing at Stacy earlier for their album, but with To Love, this is what I'm talking about, and that's a proper release with all new songs. Not this gargantuan compilation of old songs topped with a couple new songs sprinkled into the mix. We got 4 new songs here just in time for the summer, and I would say they were pretty good, but if I'm being honest, it didn't excite me as much as, let's say, something like Bebe or even their previous work. However, I do appreciate how it had that original Stacy style, which is what we know and love. But compared to the rest of these releases, I don't see it any higher than the solid tier. And just when I had my hopes up about these releases having filler, we have another one with Mamamoo's Forward. It's been a really long time since I've listened to any of their songs, and the last time was when I was making that discography ranking, which was a while back. And since then, I've been waiting ages for a new release, and it's finally here. And I gotta say, I'm pretty disappointed. First of all, it's just an intro and 1 new song. Then there's 3 different versions of that song. I mean, talk about an underwhelming release. Four Flowers itself, I really loved the vocal work, and overall it wasn't that bad, but I wouldn't call it my favorite song from them. I cannot imagine being a fan of such a group and waiting so long for a release, only for it to be a disappointment. Oh wait, yes I can. Anyway, this will go down in the bad tier mainly for its value, which I feel like it didn't offer much. Alright, one of the last minute groups that I discovered this year is At Heart, and that's with their single Shut Up. I liked it, it was super catchy, and for first impressions, I like their style. It's a very simple but well made song if you ask me. Now, it didn't totally blow me away, but I think it does belong in the solid tier. I.O.I is another one of those groups where it's my first time listening to them, and out of the great majority of groups that I've discovered lately, they've easily impressed me the most. I mean, this entire album was full of gems. It was well made from top to bottom. Songs like Suddenly, Where My Girl's At, and Then, Now, and Forever really had me in a chokehold for weeks now, as I do listen to them daily. I'll admit, Somi is the only reason why I even checked them out, cause before, I had no idea that she was part of a group, as I've only known her for her solo work. But this album was so damn good that I'm actually binging a lot of their past work, and my mind is just blown away. They're great examples of that old school K-pop style and feel more like a traditional group in my opinion. Vocally, they've been really impressive, and I might toss them up there with the likes of Mamamoo. But again, I'm still processing this album. I haven't found my bias just yet, but I am definitely a fan. And this album to me is a masterpiece. For sure, this goes up in the perfect tier. Let's talk about Sunday Morning. I.dle has been hitting that J-pop style a lot lately, and they're pretty damn good at it if you ask me. Now, I can't really say that I'm the biggest fan of this style, but for what it is, I found myself listening to it quite a bit. Not as much of It's Me, of course, but I definitely found it better than Bubby. I'll leave this up in the solid tier for now. For the past, I'd say 1 to maybe 2 years, I've really struggled to find any songs from I.D.L that I really liked, and for a moment it felt like they lost their touch. I've already said my piece on Mono, of course, but Crow? My god, this was a fucking banger. This feels like the I.D.L that I was introduced to, so think of Tomboy, Oh My God, Nude, and so forth. I haven't felt a song of that caliber in so long, so Crow definitely feels like it belongs up there with some of their best work. I don't care what anybody says because this was so damn good. Perfect tier, no ifs, ands, or buts about it. BB for so long has been one of my favorite soloists in the industry, probably since I first got into K-pop, and last year I think her new stuff was pretty good for the most part, but like I mentioned a moment ago, that album with so much filler left me sour for a little while. With this single, I feel rejuvenated, and just in time for the summer. I really love the simple and chill vibes of this song. It's really the perfect song for that tropical atmosphere, and it reminds me a lot of home. I think she knocked it out of the park with this song. I'll leave it up in the great tier. Alright, let's talk about Anderson .Paak, and before you say it, I know he's not a K-pop idol, but just the sheer amount of collabs that he has on here is incredible. aespa, NMIXX, Soyeon, and a few others, of course. I mean, big shout out to him, because we rarely get to see this many collabs going on at the same time. Just for that alone, I think this belongs in the upper echelon of my list, but that song with NMIXX and aespa was so fire. Soyeon's was great too, but I feel like that one could have been so much better. I'd love to see him collab with more groups and idols down the road. Let's put this up in the great tier for now. Another At Heart song that I'd like to mention is Butterfly Doors. I gotta say, my mind is totally blown away. Shut Up was a great introduction, but Butterfly Doors solidified it for me. This was a banger, and it really feels like I'm listening to another Racine with this quality of work. For sure, I'll put this up in the great tier. This year, I haven't really been super captivated by any rookie groups, but I will say Unchild is probably the closest. I really love the vibes of their music so far, with Energy easily being my favorite song from them. They only got like 2 songs out at the moment, and for first impressions, they look pretty good so far. Now, no offense, I wouldn't call this my favorite debut of the 5th generation, not even close, but for 2026, they're like the only rookies that have my attention. Let's put this up in the solid tier. aespa's Lemonade has to be one of their biggest albums to release, and in my opinion rivals Armageddon as their masterpiece. Now, I'd still give it to Armageddon as that album was way too stacked, but I really enjoyed Lemonade. Besides the title track and Whole Different Animal, it's loaded with hidden gems. Also, it has more of an emphasis on the hip hop style of music, which is my favorite style for aespa. Not to mention, this tops anything from last year, which is a good sign. As last year, I had a slight suspicion that they were losing their touch for a moment, but with Lemonade, they're back on track, at least for me. This easily goes up in the perfect tier. I feel like I've praised Young Posse so much for Visa, and I was really looking forward to their next release, and in this instance, it's We Don't Go to Bed Tonight. Dude, what the fuck was this? I feel like it had so much potential, but this song came across as so random to me. It was getting better towards the end, but it's a bit too energetic for my taste. I know I've mentioned before how I used to listen to dubstep and electronic music, so I do have a higher tolerance for songs like Jump, It's Me, and Celebration compared to others. But this song leans more towards that gray area where it's like a bit more on the extreme side of that style of music. I was not a fan of this by any stretch of the imagination and is easily my least favorite song from them ever. Sorry, Young Posse, but I gotta put this down in the bad tier. Let's talk about another release from I.Dle, and that's We Made. This is their summer release, and it's a bit spicier than most songs this year, but I wasn't the biggest fan of this song, if I'm being totally honest. I'm not saying that it was bad, but I think the B-sides were superior. Morning in particular being my favorite, and of course, Love Is Pain was such a fantastic ballad. Even so, I cannot put this on the same level as Mono or Crow, so for now, I'll put this up in the solid tier. Break It is one of those singles that's easy to miss because it got like little to no promotion, and comparing this to previous songs from Kiss of Life, it just doesn't feel like anything that I'm familiar with. It was an alright song. I didn't find myself going back to it a lot. It's not bad, but it's also like not on the same level as Who Is She, so I'll leave this up in the okay tier. Another at heart single, Say It. Probably my least favorite of the three in this video, but still pretty good nonetheless. But I do at least appreciate the consistency and their quality of work. Let's put this in the okay tier. And for our final release, we have Racine's single, Pretty Girl. You know, looking at all of these groups, it really feels like a lot of them this year are trying something different, which is refreshing to see. As for Racine, this song has more of a bright and bubbly sort of vibe, which I think they executed quite well, but personally, I didn't find it as interesting as Pinball, and probably just slightly below Runaway. Could it be my least favorite song from them so far? I think so. I will place this down in the okay tier as well. And there we go, my tier list of K-pop releases for 2026 so far. Like I've said before, every time I make one of these, it really feels like it keeps getting bigger and bigger. And with more groups debuting, I feel like in a few years, these videos might go past 2 hours, which I do not look forward to. So looking at all these tiers, I feel like I owe some explanation on my criteria a bit. Now, it's not super objective compared to something like my group tier list or even my day song predictions, as this is more so based on my personal taste and expectations. But for example, those that are in the perfect tier, those are releases that I found to be really well made from top to bottom, or maybe it was just my favorite release from them in general. So look at Bite Now, Crow, Lemonade. Those are some releases that I would consider some of my all-time favorites, at least among their own discographies. The great tier I feel like was really damn close to perfection, but either it was just missing a thing or two, or it just didn't meet all my personal expectations. For example, Heavy Serenade and Motto probably being the most controversial ones for me. Those weren't as impressive to me as the recent releases, and the same can be said about I.Dle's album. They were still really damn good though. The solid tier, you know, I would still consider them really good, but I wouldn't really put them in that conversation as one of my favorites from the year, and definitely not as good as their previous work. The OK tier even, I think there might be some pretty solid pieces in there, for example Go, but the rest of the album was underwhelming. The same can be said about Missimo and Triple S's album. I know a lot of people really enjoyed Love and Pop, but again, it just did not impress me as much as their previous work. But in this case, these releases all sort of teeter near the lower end of their discographies, if I'm being honest. And the bad tier is self-explanatory. I would put these in the realm of forgettable and really just flat out disappointments, Stacy's album and Goals being prime examples. Now, I'm curious to know where some of you guys align with this tier list or just with any releases in general. I'd love to know your thoughts down in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, then please drop a like, because that does support the channel a lot. And if you want to see more content like this, then consider subscribing. Anyway, thank you so much for watching and take care.